And we are back for another brainstream. And you are here if you want to know everything or anything about the future of the computer and the future of humans and how we're going to interface with each other. What does that look like? These musings or these thoughts, these brainstreams are just off the cuff, unscripted, usually about 10 minutes long. Try to do them once a day. I've worked in this field, augmented reality, artificial intelligence, designing the future paradigm of computers, of how we're going to interact with each other for over a decade now. And besides what I do daily, these things, these brain streams, is what I do to kind of share conversations I've had with people around projects I'm working on, or anything that I find intriguing. And lately, we've been talking about this idea of LayerOS, which is an idea of mine that was inspired partly from those overhead uh, slide projectors, overhead projectors, which you could put transparent sheets on, draw on them, and have them projected onto a wall or into a whiteboard behind you. And they were used in schools a lot. And what I found cool about them is the transparent sheets you could layer up to an image. So as you wanted to progress, kind of like how we use slides nowadays in keynotes, the way to progress through them is you could either swap out a completely different sheet for a completely different image, or you could layer on different parts of the image that could together generate a full image. And this kind of inspired this idea of what can this world, what is this paradigm, what can this look like beyond the apps? And I've shared in a few brain streams now of the limitations of apps, or at least what I see them. And this idea that we're going to get to a world with where a huge part of the creation, a huge part of productivity, a huge part of getting work done will be via conversation with your agent, with your personal assistant, with your digital twin, but you yourself. And we've gone through a few different things, and this kind of idea, these brain streams, at least in the last week or two, have been a lot more explorative because I've started with the basis of like where it came from, and I shared the vision or the idea behind how does this work. So just a brief recap. Let's say you have a keyboard, right? We'll use this idea because I've mocked this up years ago, and this is what I shared. Um, a few days ago, let's say you start typing the word yesterday. So different layers pop up. So the translation layer for yesterday might pop up with a few translations of languages that I might be in middle of working on or have shown interest recently, and will show me the translation. Or maybe the weather app will come and show me a layer to show me the weather of yesterday. Well, makes more sense like tomorrow. The idea is like everything tied together with the essay. Maybe photos will pop up, maybe a little movie will pop up. And as I keep going, as I keep, let's say, typing into it and have another sentence, more layers may pop up that have more got to do with that. Okay, so we realize that a sentence is now not talking about pictures from yesterday because the sentence is now actually giving a lot more context of the direction of where I want to go to, the intent. So maybe the photos from yesterday disappear, but maybe this sentence helps generate new images or videos. Maybe the translation layers are now translating this whole sentence in the languages that have opened up. So layers move, layers are fluid. They disappear and appear as the intent becomes a little bit more clear, and your system, your operating system, is always understanding. And as we go in more, maybe a paragraph comes on. Now we have more writing controls, more editing controls, like you would think in a Google Docs or Microsoft Word. These things start appearing, but we also have more generative AI, more LLM usage. We might have like a kind of a Grammarly type of layer. We might have predictive. We might see that we're going in a direction of like discussing a podcast. So maybe editing tools come up for that. The idea is that the UI, the operating system, is not kind of cordoned off into like different applications. It kind of more morphs with you. And it's also not like a browser where, with web apps, or some people have created some really powerful things in a browser. It's like, oh, some people, and this is the idea of Chrome OS, is that everything's built on the browser. And over here, it's no, this is an operating system. And it's not just on the browser, although we're very much connected, but we're not limited to just a browser or what's being served up to us. Our UI is being presented to us and generated. And I gave a kind of like also a thought behind this of like, what I find is interesting about applications is like you have companies that, some companies put in a, you know, it might be like a small little plaything for them, and some companies are putting in millions of dollars into their application. And they're building the features that they believe need to be built based on their feedback and their research, things like that, and the features that they think would work well in this product. And they bring us things that we don't even think about, and then we get to them and we're like, oh, I can't live without this. One example for me is like Descript, this idea of like editing from words instead of the waveform. Um, it's super cool. But that's like something like I don't know if I would have come up with that idea myself. But then when I'm served that, it's like, oh wow, this opens up so many more avenues and so many new ways of being creative. And there's so many interesting ways that we can actually use this. Oh, and this reminds me of something. So I might, what happens if we had X, Y, Z? So creativity is still amazing with these companies, but companies don't always give you every single one of the features you want, which means that we have to usually buy, purchase, subscribe to multiple different applications to get the work that we want done, because not every application is going to do exactly what we need, and they don't speak well to each other. Now, on the operating system, you have like the control. You have cut, copy, paste, so we can work between things, drag in files, a file system, but not necessarily do these apps work very well with each other. And a lot of the time, if one app doesn't give you what you need, you either have to completely start from scratch, or you have to build up halfway and hopefully you can translate to another app, or maybe wait until this app brings off their features, because their features is something that everyone's asking for, but you're kind of at the mercy of them, of the application. And then you look at it, the bigger problem that I have with all this is that so many apps overlap with each other. A huge part of the apps are using the same underlying concepts, but they're giving them little twist to it. So at the end of the day, you end up with 5 different styles or 10 different styles of Word documents, or video editing or audio editing. If you want a podcast, you're going from here to there and here to, you're using 20 different applications in one, which is not a problem. But this is where I like the idea of layers and this concept of, instead of everybody building their own walled garden, everything's built on this planet, this operating system, but everybody's layering on top of each other. So we go completely vertical. So when we look from the end, we have a full-on building that is constructed for us, it's customized for us, and every person that has their own expertise is adding to that. We don't have 5 different plumbers that are giving us different ways of doing plumbing. We're not constructing the same room but 80% different, right? We have rooms that have specific purposes, and they're not necessarily overlapping. And I would argue to say that the rooms that overlap, you should find a way of, merging them together in a way that you can also separate them when you need to. But it's this idea of like, everybody brings me their power, and the operating system is creating that interface. And so what I was saying about this application is, I think we're going to move away from this world where one app is going to be designing this one specific thing. Oh, we're a task manager, we're going to do this. And we're going to realize that all these things have connections, and especially where the back end of all this is not a file system, which is what people like are clamoring for when they're like, oh, the iPad is not Mac OS, but rather the operating system becomes a story. It becomes, it embodies parts of you, of your story, your why, and helps you generate that with your personal assistants, but then helps you get the job done using those principles, using those custom instructions, using these axioms that you yourself have generated and are working to and improving. So the same way that your personal, your in reality improves day to day, your digital version will also improve. And when it has access to all these, you're no longer going to be sitting inside of these applications and building these things from scratch. You're going to be infusing your soul or the meaning or reason behind things, and you're going to be creating things stacked up from that conversation, from that default of that foundation of the house. And the interface gets built up gradually, layer upon layer, and removed and added at will as you work. And you'll be creating via conversing, and that is where a lot of things will hold. You will not be looking for the files that we're looking at today. Those will be the outcomes that will be pushed out from this work. My goal of these days is to clarify these ideas in my head, but also to share them with you guys. So hopefully over the last like week, I've been able to like explain kind of like LayerOS, and we'll get into more over the coming days. We'll get into more examples of how that will actually go in the real world. But for that, I'll leave you today, and I'll see you guys